Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Imagine coming home on a Friday night expecting your partner's usual grin, only to be met with an overwhelming quietness as if someone had muted the sound in the room. It was in this uncomfortable pause that Daniel Carter, a meticulous systems analyst, felt the first crack in the trust that had sustained 3 years of marriage with Sarah Foster. He had always lived by the logic of numbers, and when the numbers started telling a different story from the one Sarah narrated, every detail began to matter. 3 work trips in 6 weeks, all last minute, none recorded in the company's shared calendar. Calls received after 11 p.m. instantly moved to speakerphone in the hallway. A sudden change of password on her laptop, just like that, she who advocated for digital transparency between couples. You, the observer, might think these are trivial coincidences, but Daniel saw patterns. He breathed patterns. The suspicion grew stronger when he cross-referenced her cell phone GPS data, something any IT professional can do in minutes, with bank records displayed in real time by a monitoring app. That night, while Sarah claimed to be boarding a flight to a workshop in Chicago, her card was used to pay for an Italian dinner just 40 minutes from their city. On the light blue monitor screen, transactions appeared one after another like a metronome marking the rhythm of his heartbeat. Earlier, Sarah had given him a quick kiss. The smell of expensive perfume freshly applied. Her suitcase packed with military precision. Everything seemed to fit except for that motel charge made 30 minutes after the supposed flight. Daniel didn't explode because anyone who works with systems understands that evidence speaks louder than accusations. He connected a key logger to the home network, enabled the Find My Device feature on her iPhone, and subscribed to a spending analysis service that tracks every penny. During the early hours of the morning, he reviewed articles on corporate infidelity. A recent study indicated that 70% of extramarital affairs begin precisely during short business trips. The statistic printed on the screen hit him like a stamp legitimizing his fear. He drank cold coffee, eyes glued to the data flow, while the house seemed to hum in slow motion. You might wonder why he didn't call her right away, why he didn't go to the airport demanding explanations. The answer lies where obsession resides. Daniel decided to turn pain into a plan. If there was a lie, he would capture it with the clarity of a raw photograph. When he finally closed his laptop, he mentally outlined a step-by-step plan that included installing a 4K micro camera in the smoke detector in their bedroom, combing through credit card reports with forensic precision, and above all, preserving the marital facade until the curtains fell with a bang. As he turned off the lights, he knew that from that moment on, everyday life would no longer be routine but rather the setting for an investigation. And without Sarah suspecting, every move she made would be measured, evaluated, archived, everything ready for the moment the truth revealed itself under spotlights she could never predict. Daniel woke up the next day with a single thought crossing his mind, proving he wasn't crazy. What most people would call jealousy or imagination, he treated as a case to be solved. His marriage to Sarah was no longer solid ground but rather a minefield where any wrong move could blow up the entire structure. He knew this and still chose to walk through it. He was too technical to act on impulse. His reasoning demanded concrete evidence. Therefore, trusting assumptions wasn't enough, he needed confirmations that left no room for doubt. Daniel was convinced that if betrayal was indeed happening, it would be meticulously planned, and Sarah wouldn't make obvious mistakes. For that reason, he decided to take the next step. He had a folding ladder at home, one of those kept under the bed for small household repairs. He took it with a mix of calmness and determination, as if setting up the scene for an operation. He carefully climbed up and opened the smoke detector, ready to install the micro camera he bought weeks earlier. But he wasn't prepared for what he found inside. There was another camera, identical, disguised with the same type of finish, as if someone had used the same store, the same strategy. The discovery froze everything inside him. He stood still for a few seconds, staring at it as if facing a trap about to spring. The first reaction was shock. The second was doubt. Who had installed that camera? Why, And most importantly, since when had someone been watching the room where he slept every night? His initial impulse was to remove the device, but rationality prevailed. He needed to analyze it coolly. He came down the ladder without making a sound, turned on his laptop, and began tracing the transmission signal. He had enough knowledge to identify IP addresses, network sources, and remote access protocols. That's how he found the destination of the transmission, another laptop synced in real time, receiving images not only from the bedroom but also from the living room. The system used a transponder connected via secure signal, and its structure indicated something carefully set up. A new layer of truth began to emerge. Sarah wasn't just hiding something, she was also monitoring him. Instead of being merely the observed, she was the observer. What initially seemed like a classic case of infidelity took on deeper contours. Why would she be spying on her own husband? Did she suspect him of something too? Daniel swallowed hard as he realized this could be part of a bigger story, a story that involved much more than infidelity. Perhaps their marriage was being corroded from both sides at once. Perhaps, like him, she had discovered something too. Maybe she was just trying to confirm an old suspicion. Even with this revelation, Daniel didn't rush. He spent the rest of the day analyzing the recording patterns. He noticed the cameras were active whenever he left the house or spent long hours in the office. This explained why Sarah never insisted he stay home more often. She needed time to review the files, maybe even edit them. The hypothesis was risky but not impossible. And once again, the main point remained, nothing was what it seemed. The domestic life that once appeared predictable now revealed itself as a stage of mutual surveillance, where each tried to understand the other without saying a single word, a silent but brutal game. Daniel then began listing all the moments when Sarah's behavior had deviated from the norm, every excuse to go to bed early, every muffled laugh on the phone with her friend Jessica, every out-of-hours meeting with fictitious clients. It all made sense, but in a new way. She wasn't acting like someone simply hiding a lover, she was acting like someone studying an opponent. And this completely changed the dynamic between them. The marriage, which should have been a safe place, had become a field of surveillance and strategies, two distrustful players silently plotting plans, each believing the other was lying. It was hard for Daniel to accept how much control he had lost over his own routine. The idea of being recorded, evaluated, misinterpreted out of context messed with his mind in ways he had never experienced. It went beyond trust, it was about freedom, about dignity. He began to wonder how long she had been watching him through the lens of a screen, interpreting his gestures, his looks, his silences as pieces of a puzzle. The paranoia previously fueled only by bank data and strange signals now gained a face, Sarah's face, sitting somewhere observing him as if he were a suspect. The anguish wasn't limited to the fear of betrayal but extended to the realization that everything they had lived through in recent months might have been part of an act. Daniel no longer knew to what extent his actions had been spontaneous or conditioned by the invisible presence of the cameras. He caught himself thinking about the nights he spent more time on the couch, the mornings he preferred leaving early to avoid conversations. Was Sarah interpreting this as signs of guilt? Was she, like him, building her own narrative based on scattered fragments? This became a cruel paradox. In trying to protect their own hearts, both ended up feeding the same fear, making the same mistakes. Daniel still didn't have all the answers, but one thing was certain, what was happening inside that marriage was more complex than any discovery he imagined making. From that moment on, it wasn't enough to follow the trail of Sarah's lies, it was time to understand why she was following his. The line between surveillance and distrust shattered completely when Daniel decided to check Sarah's complete financial statements. What started as a simple analysis turned into a deep dive into the bowels of his wife's financial life. He activated an automatic categorization feature for expenses, which sorts transactions by location, type of establishment, and time. That's what led him to the first major concrete point of rupture, a series of periodic transfers to an account with a name he had never seen before, S. Foster Consulting. The detail was that Sarah didn't own a registered business under her own name, nor had she ever mentioned any plans to start one. The transfers weren't extravagant amounts but followed a very specific pattern, always on Wednesdays between 11 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., exactly $500. The timing coincided with the new lunch break she claimed to have adopted due to strategic meetings with her team. It was as if she were hiding an entire life in small 30-minute blocks. Suspicion took on another dimension when he cross-referenced the data with GPS records and saw that on 6 of the last 8 Wednesdays, her phone stayed within a 500-meter radius of a Sunview motel, a common place with a discreet facade that accepted prepaid reservations by card but didn't require the guest's name. The confirmation that something was being carefully orchestrated by Sarah hit Daniel like a silent blow. None of what she said in recent weeks matched the data. The maps showed repeated stops, and the bank records supported the parallel routine. He even noticed that the day before the trip where she claimed to have flown to Chicago, she bought a sophisticated piece of lingerie and, on the same day, renewed her reservation at the same motel that had already appeared in previous weeks. This wasn't a slip-up, it was planning. But what truly deepened the impact of the discovery was the date of a particular purchase. 3 days after he returned from a professional conference in Seattle, she bought a surveillance camera kit and a GPS transponder from the same online store he used to buy his. The coincidence was disturbing. It indicated that she not only began to suspect him but also took practical steps to confirm her suspicions. From there, the conclusion that they were both living mirrored lives solidified. Every gesture, every absence, every habit change had been interpreted through lenses of insecurity. Instead of dialogue, both chose tactical silence followed by amateur investigations. Daniel felt something strange, realizing that she might have decided to start an affair as a form of emotional compensation or even revenge. The line between motivation and consequence began to blur. Was she really interested in another man, or did she just want him to feel the way she had been feeling? His mind dove deep into this doubt, thinking that the infidelity wasn't just physical but emotional, symbolic, a way to communicate something never spoken aloud. Amplifying the pain, he began to understand that their marriage was trapped in a silent cycle of undeclared retaliation. They had created a system where each reacted to the other in silence and calculation, as if on opposite sides of a courtroom without a judge. Intimacy had been replaced by hypotheses, and feelings by interpretations. This exposed the second concept tormenting him, the reciprocity of damage. Daniel realized it was no longer just about finding out if Sarah had a lover. The question now was broader: to what extent had they mutually destroyed each other without realizing it? The lack of communication became the true villain of the story. Every action taken to protect oneself only dug a deeper hole in the relationship. What hurt Daniel the most was realizing Sarah seemed as convinced of his guilt as he was of hers. They were stuck in a reflective cycle. What she saw as distance, he interpreted as coldness. What he viewed as a lack of affection, she might see as punishment. No one was innocent. Both had stopped loving and started monitoring. Still, something inside him wanted to see with his own eyes what the data only suggested. Despite all the signs, a small part resisted confirmation, a part that still hoped it was all a big misunderstanding, that the Sarah he once knew was just lost, hurt, but not corrupted. But that hope was about to be tested. And when the truth ceased to be a hypothesis and became a real image before him, Daniel knew the consequences wouldn't be just emotional. What came next would involve definitive choices whose effects no one could undo. Daniel had spent days dealing with numbers, coordinates, images, and data, cross-referencing all in silence, all with the self-control of someone who chooses to suffer quietly rather than risk appearing weak by exposing his pain. But inside him, anger accumulated in layers. It wasn't just jealousy, it wasn't just insecurity, it was humiliation. The feeling of being treated like a fool while every detail of his routine was dissected by someone who shared his bed, someone who once promised partnership but chose to investigate instead of talking. And the cruelest part, Sarah was doing all this as if she were sure he deserved it. It ate away at him from the inside. He understood there was only one way to regain the dignity she tried to take from him: expose everything. And it wouldn't be a discreet exposure done behind closed doors. It was necessary to return with the same strategic coldness. Every piece of shame she made him feel, Daniel discovered that the Mark Thompson name used for motel reservations was the regional manager at the same company where Sarah worked. By investigating public records, he found proof of meetings between them on dates that matched the days she claimed to be in other cities. The professional connection gradually transformed into a carefully hidden intimate alliance. But now he had enough evidence to turn that alliance into a scandal. During the planning of his revenge, Daniel enlisted the help of a former college classmate who worked in corporate security. Together, they compiled videos, screenshots, bank statements, geolocated transactions, everything time-stamped, everything organized like a dossier. He didn't want impulsive revenge, he wanted something surgical, something that cut deep but left no room for dispute. He knew Sarah's weakest point was her reputation. She had risen too fast in the company hierarchy to admit any public misstep. That was the one thing that still kept her chin up at the company's annual convention broadcast live on the corporate internet. Daniel appeared as a guest of one of the investors in the IT sector. He wasn't expected, no one knew he would come, and that's exactly what gave even more weight to what happened there. During the final round of questions and answers, he requested the floor, calmly as if delivering a technical report. He connected his laptop to the main screen and showed what he called the result of a personal integrity audit. No one understood until the first video appeared. The footage showed Mark leaving the motel with Sarah, both getting into the same car. Next, bank statements, reservations made under third-party names, and corporate emails with fake meeting codes appeared. The auditorium fell into absolute silence. No words were spoken for long seconds. Mark stood up trying to interrupt, but it was too late. The company's ethics director called security, and the two were escorted out while the room still tried to process what had been revealed. Sarah tried to maintain composure, but her eyes were filled with panic when she realized Daniel had planned every detail of that moment. She understood how much she underestimated his ability to react. She not only lost her husband's trust but saw the impeccable professional image she had spent years building collapse in front of everyone. Daniel, on the other hand, remained impassive. There was pain, but it was controlled. It was no longer an open wound, it was now a scar he had learned to use as a shield. What mattered most at that moment was that he managed to reverse the roles. That was the scene he wanted to keep in his memory: Sarah cornered, watching her lover exposed, her reputation dissolve, and the authority she used to manipulate him crumble amidst awkward applause. Daniel's revenge wasn't shouted, wasn't impulsive, it was calculated, and precisely because of that, it was devastating. When silence took over the room, and all eyes turned to Sarah, what broke there was more than a professional reputation, it was the illusion that well-laid lies can sustain anything. She remained motionless, unable to formulate even a coherent defense. Her eyes searched for answers in faces that no longer offered comfort, only judgment. Daniel left the convention without looking back. He had accomplished what he needed to do. What he carried from that point forward was no longer a desire for revenge but a profound liberation. He had spent so much time trapped in assumptions, theories, and trails of distrust that seeing everything collapse in front of the truth felt like taking a deep breath after being submerged for a long time. In the days that followed, the company's internal media downplayed the incident with evasive notes, and leadership treated the episode as a review of ethical conduct. But those who witnessed it never forgot. Mark lost his position. Sarah submitted her resignation, and the two disappeared from the corporate public scene. Daniel, on the other hand, moved in a different direction. He sold the apartment, quit his job, and decided to start over. For the first time in years, he chose to live without calculating every step. He understood that the greatest betrayal in the end didn't come from hidden actions but from the omission of words. Both had spent months spying on each other instead of listening. If they had talked when doubts arose, perhaps the outcome would have been different. Over time, Sarah tried to reach out. She sent messages, wrote emails, and even showed up at his new address, not to apologize but to say she now understood what they had both lost. She tried to justify her decisions, saying she believed she was being betrayed, that all her actions were born out of fear. Daniel listened but didn't respond. She left in silence, and he realized in that moment that some scars no longer hurt but also don't allow for reconciliation. Sometimes, the lesson comes precisely in the absence of forgiveness. Living with the weight of what one has caused another is more educational than any quick pardon. The most surprising development, however, came months later. One of the company's lawyers contacted Daniel, informing him that due to the allegations and evidence provided, he was entitled to a portion of the settlement paid by Mark to the corporation in a judicial agreement. The amount was substantial. It could have allowed him to rebuild his life comfortably. But upon receiving the deposit, Daniel made an unexpected decision. He donated it all to an organization that investigates digital crimes and privacy violations. He wanted to transform his pain into a shield for others. The woman who had destroyed his peace with cameras and trackers was now the reason he contributed to protecting the freedom of strangers. There, the story ends, not with a reconciliatory kiss or a sweet overcoming together finale but with a choice. The choice of someone who, even wounded, decided to transform everything he learned into something no one could take away from him. And perhaps in this final gesture lies the true victory, because there is something stronger than revenge, more powerful than anger, the ability to move forward without carrying what no longer deserves space within you. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.